So I'm not going to take you through the complete slides. Maybe I'll just run through slides, and I'm going to try demo if everything works well with the internet and everything. So you should be seeing some demo. Otherwise, I have the complete instructions for you on my demo. All right? So this is my topic for today. How many of you have done continuous integration before, just for knowledge sake? CI, in short. Maybe very few. OK, great. Kubernetes? Oh, that's a fair bit of time. OK. Now we're just going to mix these two things up. The slides are there up, so if you want, grab the bit.ly link or the QR code. You can go to the slides. I'm still updating it. Probably just try once more after the session in case if I make some changes. So who am I? It's a very philosophical question, right? Who am I? So myself, Kamesh, I'm a director for developer advocacy at Harness and a Google developer expert for cloud, especially Kubernetes, and a long-term open source contributor. So there are a few of my social handles as QR codes in case if you have any questions on this session, please do reach out to me, so I'll be happy to answer your question. All right? So what are we going to talk? So let's rewind back, right? So let's go back. Let me start with the story, right? Once upon a time, even when I started some 22 years back now as a developer. So this is what we have been trying, right? Anybody? I'm a Java developer, so I'll quote all Java examples, but it's going to be pretty much same with any kind of thing, programming language used, right? It could be Golang or it could be anything, so the same process, right? So let me take a Java example. So I want to deploy my application into production. So that's how it all started, right? And I write my application, package them as var. If everybody knows Java, then var is pretty easy one for you. And then I test it on Windows 7 desktop, and then, it's a Friday evening. I want to get to my party. So I give it to my operations guys to deploy it. What does he do? Right? Again, gave me write a documentation. I have to write 2 or 3 pages of documentation in my old company when I want to deploy the application, give it to them, all set of Maven commands and all other things, and then give it to this guy, right? And I had a happy weekend, and when I come back on Monday, so this is what I see. The application is still not deployed into production. And it's quite evident from my slide why it is not, right? How many of you have faced this situation? Friday evening or Thursday evening, give my application to deployment to my ops guy or anybody in operations for that matter. And then when I come back on Monday, my application is not in production, even on Saturday, right? You'll be getting a series of emails, obviously. We're not seeing the emails because of our Friday party. And then this is what happens. The reason being for this is that what I write my code on and what I get it deployed are two different things, right? So that's the main problem. So this is what I call as a wall of confusion, right? Because between a dev and ops, because both of them doesn't know what's the application you're developing on, and ops guy and developer doesn't know what's the application you're deploying on, right? So this starts to play a blame game between each other. This has been a situation for quite long until this happened. When Docker came out with containers, we started to package everything as containers. There's no longer a separate operating system for thing, and then we started packaging all the applications into a container, including a OS, dependencies. In my case, it's going to be a Java app server, its configurations, et cetera, and then push it to my registry, and then this guy, my production guy, is going to take and run it to my production, right? So it's as simple as that, all right? So this is what we call as container native. So this is one of the strategies what started the evolution when Docker introduced containers. People started to make applications as containers, right? And then it was nothing like that, okay, I'm not saying, okay, I built something which runs around containers. Okay, we'll talk about that a bit later. But that's how it started. So we started an application which was built for container, right? Everything is treated, each and every software unit is going to be treated as a container. So the day one, any developer starts to develop my application, I'm going to develop as a container, all right? So this kind of made everybody started to move to cloud, right? When the cloud evolution started, every cloud starts to support containers, and people say, okay, I package my application as container and push it into cloud, all right? Let's say events could be a monolithic or microservice or serverless, anything, right? Anything, end of the day, all the cloud provider today, they need that my application needs to be a container in some registry, right? Or their own cloud provider registry for that matter. So in my case, so what we did is like we take this big monolithic Java application and push the application into cloud, and we started moving every application into cloud, right? So, and then sadly, this wall of confusion was broken. There is no longer need to be a confusion between the dev and ops, right? Because for a developer, its everyday command became Docker build and Docker push, or any kind of an equivalent command in any other thing. And finally, for a operations guy, it's just going to be a Docker run, right? Or a tool that basically does this Docker run. That's all is required at the end of the day, right? So no longer there's a confusion between these guys. We started to evolve into what is called as DevOps, right? We started organizing a total company into DevOps-based culture, and then we started moving towards that, right? But still, this did not last long, all right? So why? Because when I started to do something like this, I have a repository, I'm using Git in this case, and then I started to move this application. So technically what happens when somebody pushes the code into Git, there'll be a series of scripts that we'll be writing, and this script basically will do Docker build and Docker push kind of thing, and then push it into a registry. And once that is there in the registry, you'll take and do a Docker run. Again, there's going to be a series of scripts, right? And then I started to, what happened is that because I'm pushing, if you see the earlier slides, we started to push the monolithic application into the cloud. What happened is that as the monolithic application grew fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter, right? What happened? You started to get a lot of other problems, right? Basically, I was not able to do, my resources were not there in the cloud. I have to spin up something, elastic computing kind of thing. I have to start expanding my cloud on and off. To roll back something new is going to be hard because this huge container, I have to pack everything into the container and deploy it. And then that causes me to kind of roll back this thing and much more problems, right? In a short, if I put, your release cycle was not that happy, all right? It's very hard to maintain and hard to do. And then scripting for all these things, when new service is getting added, it's going to be technically a very, very difficult problem for you, all right? So what was the need of the hour, right? So we are searching for something at that time that could help us to do all these things automatically the moment I say git push, right? And that's, I think probably I missed one slide here, so let me go to that one, okay? So this is what happened, right? So when we say, okay, I write a script, and this script is basically going to take a code from my GitHub or any GitLab or any kind of your Git repositories and kind of start to do continuous integration, build the application, and deploy it into production, which means that things are going to be much, much, much easier and simpler, right? Because there is no longer scripts which can do this job, and there's no longer an operation guys who have to run the script, or even automated way, right? Ansible, Chef, Puppet kind of thing, right? So to an extent, what also happened with this advent of continuous integration, your operational complexity was also solved a little bit with Kubernetes, right? Even your CI basically was able to kind of do this build and push into the container, but still I was in need of somebody who could orchestrate all these containers together, right? What I call as an application orchestrator. So that's what Kubernetes did for you, right? Kubernetes kind of took all these images from your container registry and start orchestrate stuff, and then it kind of pushed these things up into your production environment, right? With continuous integration, my operation complexity, which was there, I talked earlier in few slides ago, because of my monolithic to microservice movement, was solved, all right? But again, one question still remains, right? I moved into continuous integration, but the continuous integration tools that I have today, are they built for container native? Or are they ready for to be run as containers? Many tools exist, even now, but most of the tools are not container ready, right? Because they don't understand the container paradigms, kind of lift and shift thing which we talked earlier. Everybody was moving to containers, cloud, and I also wanted to move to containers and cloud. That's what these CI tools also did. And they moved into containers, and unfortunately, they were not able to perform in the CI role, right? That's where the other problem is, I'll just skip this slide. That's where Drone was born. Drone was a very simple CI-based, container-based tool that can do CI/CD using containers. So that's what in a short, if I say, it's nothing but a container-native pipeline, right? Pipeline is nothing but a sequence of containers runs together, what is called as steps, and it does this job, like build, push, and all these things, kind of thing. So this, when Drone was born, it is in 2012, this is just an history about that. And one of the important thing about that, we at Harness, we acquired Drone in August 2020, so which became now as part of the Harness platform, CI Enterprise CI platform as well. So, but just to explain about Drone, right, it's built on Docker, multi-OS, which can run on any OS you want, multi-architecture, multi-SCM, self-hosted. It's a very small footprint. You don't need a big server to run Drone. It's a very small bunch of series of Golang thing. You can run on any machine. I'm going to show that I'm running on my laptop, which is not a very high-performing laptop as well, right? That was about Drone, right? So, but now why I'm stressing on this is built on Docker. So if you read about that point, that's what you're talking about in the last 15 minutes, I guess, right? So we say we want something that should be running around containers. So it was built for containers and should understand the container paradigms well, so that it's easy for me to build and push any kind of an image into container registry and start running them, all right? Make my job easier, because as a developer, I now start to move writing any application as containers. So my first job is that I know how to write a Docker file. I know how to do a Docker build and Docker push. That's a very elementary commands that anybody wants to do, right? Awesome. So what's next? So what is drone pipeline? What is the, I mean, let's go deeper into this, saying like what is container native pipelines means to me, all right? So container native pipelines is a very simple drone YAML for you. It's a pipeline file end of the day. It's another YAML file. How many of you like YAML here? Okay, because there is a lot of noise. If you go to the Twitter, right, you'll see a lot of noise that people say, I don't like YAML, right? Because the only problem is this, you have to do spacing, you have to do this. If I'm a Windows user, then I lost, okay? A simple trick, if you have not done this on your VS Code, if you're using VS Code as an extension, right, you can make all these spaces thing out, right? You can go to VS Code, go to your settings, there is a setting which says convert tabs into spaces, your job is done. That's all you need to do, right? Anyways, fun. So this is what we did. So drone YAML, if you see here, I say it's a kind pipeline. As I said, what a pipeline is nothing but it's a type. I'm going to type, I say, okay, Docker. I have a Kubernetes runner. You'll see an example of a Kubernetes runner as well. And then we have a AWS runner. We have cloud runner for each and every cloud that we have right now, all right, including Google as well. So on the steps is what I'm going to say series of build and push steps, right? For example, let's say I'm going to build a Java application. Just take that example, or any application for that matter. The first step is going to be I'm going to build, I'm going to test, I'm going to package this application, and then finally I'm going to push this application into a registry. So these are the very 4 steps, and optionally, we'll also do a deploy to K8s, right, in case if you want to do that. So those are the steps, and each of those steps will be containers. For example, in this case, if you see, I'm going to do a test, which is a Golang container end of the day, and then I do go build and go test, all right? So this, if you imagine for a second, this is something we have been doing as scripts. So when you started to move to containers, we wrote scripts which basically does this job for you, like you write Docker push, Docker build, Docker run, all these series of Docker commands or any other equivalent commands on them, and then run the script, right? So this is exactly what drone does to you behind the scenes. You don't need to run those scripts, write it as steps, like what I've shown right now, and then it will take care of doing all the series of Docker commands that you see on my screen. So Docker kind of mounting a volume, cloning the source code, building the source code, and then in case you want to push it to a registry, you can push it to a registry or whatever you need, all right? And also, this helps a lot when you are kind of having a heterogeneous team, right? For example, I have a team which has probably a developer who's a Go developer, and then somebody does a Selenium browser testing, and somebody does a DBA, end of the day, and then there's a person who also does push things into Google Cloud, all right? So I have a series of team, right, which has different things, right? The easiest thing right now with container native pipelines is that all I require that is just do this thing, right? It's going, okay, it's gone. It's a bit slow. So if you see this one, all the team is working together. All is required from each team is give me the right image with the right commands. That's all. So that's all is required because it's easy for us to kind of do this way and kind of run all these series of commands, which is going to be my pipeline, a series of steps, which is called as a pipeline again. I'm reiterating this, right? Fantastic. So what this also helps us is kind of having these images pushed together, right, and kind of use them together in tandem, reusable pipelines, right? For example, I could combine the GCS copy and the build steps together and create something called as pipeline plugins. We'll see that in next slides. So and then kind of reuse this command, pass the settings, and give it to some else team, right? If they want to kind of do the same thing, which means that my pipeline becomes completely reusable. All right. So this also gives you another big advantage over a few things, over a few other tools, because the reusability is a very crucial part of your pipelines, because everything, whatever you did, it will be used by somebody else. Great? Awesome. This is what is drone pipelines, plugins is called about, right? So what are plugins? Drone CI plugins are Docker containers again, as we saw earlier. We combined the GCS copy and then build steps together and made a new one and pushed into a company registry, right? Or any registry you want that matter. So it's kind of Docker containers that perform predefined tasks and are configured as steps in your pipeline. That's as simple as that. So if anybody else in your team wants that, and any of your friends you want that, or community needs that, you can just give it to the community and do that. I'll put a link on the resources section. There's plugins.drone.io, which is a completely community-based thing. So you can go there. You'll find a lot of available plugins, reusable plugins, which you can use as part of your drone pipelines. Okay? Great. So example here, I have a couple of plugins. So the plugin is Docker and plugin Slack. These are 2 things which is needed for you in this case. In this example, what I've shown here, to kind of do a build, push into registry, and finally send a notification on Slack. Great? So far, so cool. Like let's take a quick demo of what these things looks like, right? So I hope my demo works. Let's go here. I'll show you a simple pipeline here on my screen. So this is what you see on my screen, right? So these examples, let me go to those resources as well before I jump into these things, right? So this is the one, the example that we're going to deploy, this application here. So it's called as Lingua Greater. The idea is like it's simple hello world again, but it uses Google Translation API behind the scenes on Kubernetes, right? It's simple, again going to say hello world for you, but only thing is that it's going to say in different languages that you configure for it to do. The complete source code is available here. I've given you the steps, how to build and deploy this. So it's as simple as that. So even in case if you're missing my commands, don't worry. So they're all there. And we're going to talk about one more thing later. I'll also share the repository a bit earlier. So this is around GitOps. We'll talk about that a bit later. So the repository is also there. So all these things are doable from within your laptops. You don't need to go find out something on there or heavy cloud resources, nothing like that, since it's a demonstration. So all you require is that Docker for Mac, Windows, or Linux, and then you have Drone CLI, and K3D is nothing but a very minimized CNCF project called as K3S. It's a minimized version of that. It runs a very lightweight Kubernetes on your desktops, all right? So with that, let's go to the demo, right? So what I have here, so you'll be seeing a lot of reds here. I've been trying all sort of things before this demo. So this is the same project. I'm having it locally. So my pipeline here says that, okay, I'm checking if Nexus is available, if people are aware of Java. So it's just, again, a Maven repository manager to make your builds faster. And then I do a Java build. I have a plugin build myself for Maven. So I'm just using that and passing the mirror URL for that. It's a simple set of Maven commands to do. And finally, I do a build and push. And eventually, I deploy this application into Kubernetes, right? And then it uses Kafka behind the scenes. That's the reason why I'm doing some Helm commands here and doing a Kafka, right? So this is as simple as that, right? We are kind of making it declarative. Your pipelines are declarative right now when you write this way, which means that I can version it, run the specific version whenever I change something, all right? Let's quickly kickstart this. So I'm going to do a build for this. I hope all the things work. Git commit empty. I'm on the right project? Yes, I'm on. Trigger build. All right, and then git push, drone demo. So that's my thing. And then you should start to see this one getting triggered here. Okay, there's a build trigger here. So we'll wait for that to happen. So it will take a few seconds for that to complete. So we have a clone step, and then we have ensure step, making sure the Nexus works, and all these things. While that happens, it takes roughly around a minute or so. Is there any questions that I can take before we move to the next part? Yes, please. Can I have a mic to this gentleman so he have some question?
Yeah, I have one question that how does it compare to like the already available tools like Jenkins and Cloud Build? I think it's more comparable to Cloud Build. So
Okay, it's kind of quite similar because Cloud Builder or any other cloud-based build tools, right? They're all built around the same technology, cloud and specific things, right? But in some cases, some of your cloud builders or even any other provider's cloud thing, right, if you take for that matter, they're all more tied to that cloud. I have to use that cloud for me to go start building stuff. Otherwise, that's not going to work, right? In case if I'm going to have it outside, right, we're not using cloud. I have a hybrid situation where I have something on cloud, something on my private data center, and something somewhere else, right, which is not cloud for that matter, right? In that case, I cannot use those cloud builder tools. In those cases, I have to need something which is cloud agnostic, right, which can run anywhere with or without cloud. So that's exactly what Drone does for you.
Yeah, another question I had like, so do we need to install any CRDs in our Kubernetes cluster?
Not at all. Okay. So that's another powerful feature of Drone is that you don't need any kind of Kubernetes CRDs. I worked a lot in Tekton. I really faced a lot of trouble with Tekton. I'm not blaming that project, but generally if you see there's a lot of CRDs, a lot of complexities involved when you start to use them, right? When you start to have CRDs, when you start to have something which is dependent on something on Kubernetes to kind of run, right? We cannot do this. This one is just orchestrating containers for you, that's all. It could be any containers for that matter. It could be anywhere else in the planet, except that it needs to be on registry. It can run. Just take it and run it, right? As you see on my screen, I showed you an example as well. So if you go here to my pipeline, I know deploy for KDS has failed. I know the reason is because I already have this thing added here, so it kind of doesn't do an install. That should be the command. So if you see here, I'm not using any CRDs here. It's a series of thing. It's an Alpine image. I'm just running a bunch of commands, right? Just like how you do on a script, but in more structured way, in a declarative way, right? And passing and setting some environment variables and all this thing which is specific to step. There is no CRDs here, right? So let's go and check what is my status here. Obviously, 100%, the reason is because I still have a name, right? So I have an application that is running here. So let's go there, AJCC, my apps. So I have a zookeeper and everything. I have this application running there. So the build is failed because I already have Kafka here. So I have my application running here. So let's do a port forward. Okay, port forward. And then it's be in a different namespace for that matter. But please do make about this failure because I induced this failure specifically because that's going to drive us the next thing. So let's go here and then go here, localhost 8080. I hope something should come here soon. Okay, so it says reactive programming because I'm using reactive programming behind the scenes. But you say that it should start to go out in any other languages in say next 5-10 seconds, hopefully, right? So let me go here. Let's see the logs. If you're good. Okay, logs. Perhaps. Okay, we are good here. So it should start to. Okay, there we go. So this is using an API behind the scenes. Google Translation API is used. And that's the reason I'm not showing that step where I create that credentials JSON. That's very mandatory requirement for you before we go there. And it starts to do this thing, right, behind the scenes, okay? So let me do a quick change for this. So that's how CI works behind the scene, but we'll use that for another demo. Let's go back to our slides, right? Let it keep running. So we saw this. So we use all these components together, drone there, Git there, distribution there. And this is a very typical everyday Kubernetes life, right? So you have to start building something, push it into the image registry, do a build, and pull it from the image registry, start running it, right? But if you look for a second, right, when I showed my drone YAML, we had some problems. How many of you identified issues with that? Issues in sense, not a bug, but there were some constraints when we use things that way, okay? So let's analyze what are they, okay? It is pretty hard to maintain this, right? Because when my number of steps starts to grow, right? What basically happens is that when I start to put all my deployment logic into my build pipeline, right? That's going to cause a lot of headache, right? We are going back to the same old scripting way where we did everything inside the scripts, all right? So, and then mixed code and infrastructure, right? So because if you see part of the code, first 3 steps of the code which you saw earlier, we were doing a source code build, right? Source code build and source code build push, right? Which is kind of taking your containers. And the next part, we jumped right from there into what we call as infrastructure setup, right? We are just deploying applications into Kubernetes. So which is kind of mixing these 2 things together, right? It's one of the things of Unix philosophy is that always do single responsibility thing, right? Just do what is intended to do. A CI tool is just needed to do only CI. In cloud world, CI means I'm just building container image. You can just put CI, it's not only continuous integration, it is also doing container image, right? That's what I call this as, right? So build and push container image into the registry. So that's another thing, right? Reduces usability, because if you see my example, I've hard-coded all my namespaces and everything in my Kubernetes deployment. And even I hard-coded the name of the Kafka cluster that I'm deploying it, right? Because the name already exists, my deployment failed, right? So because it reduces complexity, because other team might be having different set of naming conventions, right? Another team will be, so which means that this particular script or a pipeline file that I wrote is not reusable because I'm mixing CI and CD together, all right? No consistency, which means that what if I have 3 or 4 clusters of Kubernetes and I want to deploy the same application across all these clusters? So which means that there might be some cluster restrictions from one cluster to another cluster, which means that this is again not portable across multiple different clusters, okay? And no deployment history, right? I do have build history, but there is no deployment history. What happened to my Kubernetes deployment, which was deployed with pipeline number 123 or 1156, something like that? I cannot maintain this history as well, right? And last but not least, to deploy things into Kubernetes, I also need container credentials, right? In this case, I'm doing it for a local cluster, so everything is there. But technically, when you're doing that in a production, so obviously you need the cluster kubeconfig file. Where do I store them? I cannot store as part of my CI because then every developer is able to access it, right? So these are some problems, or I call as shortcomings when I start to use CI as a CD tool. And that's what everybody does today, most of the people. I'm not blaming things for them again. People just got picked up with this tool, start to do everything with that, right? So what should we do in this case? Okay, we have to adopt something called as GitOps, right? In this case, a version continuous deployment, because for today's every basic need we are using Git. Everybody is on Git today, right? Everybody is on doing Git. Everybody is doing things on Git. Everything is there on Git, right? Which is kind of source of truth for you. Then why not we use that to do for deployments as well, right? Does that make sense? That's what we're going to do right now. So this is one of the Kesley Hightower's tweet I like a lot. He says, GitOps means version CI/CD on top of declarative infrastructure, because Kubernetes is all declarative. I have a manifest which does the deployment. I have images which needs. I have services, PVCs, persistent volumes, persistent volume claims. Everything is there, right? Then why can't I do kind of thing with GitOps itself, right? Kind of stop scripting and start shipping. So that's what I like, that particular thing. That's why I highlighted that. So this is what GitOps is all about, right? I'm not going to write the next demo which you're going to see. I'm not going to write stuff. I'm going to pull out that create as deploy out of my application, and then I'm going to use GitOps to do the deployment. But before that, what's the advantages of using GitOps, right? Probably most of them are kind of synonyms for all the constraints that we saw earlier. Deploy faster and more often, right? Which means that because when I do a build, something got pushed into registry, this particular tools or whatever tools you're going to use, I'm going to use Argo CD as an example here. So that's going to listen to your changes and take the manifest and apply the manifest, and also write back to your Git saying that, okay, this particular version or SHA 256 manifest has been deployed, which means that I have an history of that, right? Easy and faster recovery, right? In this case, for example, if you take my example, I told that I induced an error purposefully because I know I installed Kafka with the same name, which Helm does not allow, or any manifest I cannot create, which means that I have to go and change the name. So how do I change the name? So I have to go back to my script and change the name, right? Or use an environment variable or something like that. Anyway, there's a change involved there, right? Which means that that's not the right way to do easy recovery, right? So because I have to go change something, end of the day, there's a manual process. I say CI/CD. This shows 8, actually. All right. So easy credential management, I can push all my credentials inside my GitOps, and everything is going to be there. Self-documenting deployments and shared knowledge. It could be shared across all your team, right? So since I'm running short of time, let's get into the demo. So all these things are there on slides. In case if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. So let's do that. The first thing I'm going to do is like go back to my thing, and then I'm going to comment this out or remove this step. Okay, let me comment. That's a better one. I just use YAML. Okay, which means that I'm good here. It will not do create as deploy. Okay. So while that happens, so it's going to trigger another build. Let's verify if that's getting done. Great, right? So now when that happens, what also happens here is that I have Argo CD deployment here. So I have resources for what's Argo CD and everything here. So what it basically going to do is that there is a kube runner here, and as also having drone, which is going to do a deployment for us, as we saw again. And there is an Argo CD image updater. That's what is going to look for your changes for the images. Okay. So let's go do this deployment, right? What I'm going to do right now, I'm going to another project. Obviously, I'll use the GitHub here, so because that's make it easy for me to explain stuff. So we've done a bunch of stuff here. So I'm just going to create this one, an application, CD greeter. Okay. So I'm just going to do a Helm apply, nothing more than that. I created a Helm thing, and then I say init GitOps for this, in this case. Git commit, git push, I'll just see what GitOps demo, right? Okay. Let me change my branch. I should not be here actually. Great. Let me check my code. So what I'm doing here is that kind of creating my applications declaratively. So let me go here and then see what my values are. This is there. Okay. So I need to be on a main branch. I should not be on a demo branch. So that's what I was checking for. Okay. So the values are still there. So let me see git commit push. I hope this does this. Git push GitOps main. Okay. The moment I do this, you should see an app coming up here. So let me see if that's there. So okay, I have to do this, and then I have pushed this into the repository here. If you go to my local Git one, just did it 14 seconds ago. So this was the one which we pushed, trigger GitOps, but my app is not there. So I need to go create my app. So that's what I'm going to do next. So I'm just running through this so that you can also do that later. So I'm just going to apply these apps. So when you do this one, that's going to create an application in Argo CD soon. So let me see there. Okay, you see this one? So now, if you imagine the earlier one, we did Kafka by ourselves, right? Now, the Kafka is getting deployed by your Argo CD application. I'm not doing that. I'm not writing anything. I'm just applied a couple of things on my GitHub repository, and then that's taking the stuff and doing that for you, right? And that should also be another application, which should also be here. Where is that? Let's go see if my application is up there. So let me do a refresh. Yeah, there we go, right? The demo apps, which is there here, so which is again doing the same greeter deployment here, and I have one pod up and running for me right now, so which means the sync is okay. So let me go there, and so I purposefully deployed that in a different namespace. So let's go check that one. So I'll stop this port forward. I'm going to do it from a different port. KGSVC, right? It's there. So I have a service here. I have the Kafka deployed on a different namespace. Okay, so this is going to go to that one. So let's go and do a port forward again. K port forward. So if you see that, I used the demo apps namespace. So I'm just going to go there. So hopefully my greeter picks it up from here. Okay, let's go here. So I'm going to do that in a incognito window just to avoid any cookies. Is that not there running? Okay, it's here. Right, it's back again, the same application, but now everything was done declaratively. I did not write. If you remember, I commented the Kubernetes deployment from my pipeline. I segregated CI and CD. And now what I did is kind of stuff, I moved everything into GitOps, which means that Argo CD is going to take care of doing the job for me, right? So let's quick one change before we actually go back to our stuff here. So let's go back. I hope this one runs here, klogs. Okay, let's go here, and then go to thing one, and then if you see this one, so if you see this, I've not specified SHA anywhere, right? So I did not do this. So if let's go back and see our manifest, right? So in our manifest, in a chart, values.yaml, I just said example lingua greeter, right? That's going to be from my local thing. But if you see this one, it's pushed up from my local registry and then updated my image, right? So this is what happens, and this is what GitOps does for you, right? I'm not taking the stuff myself. It's kind of taken from my registry to the latest digest that has been deployed and applied to your manifest directly by Argo CD. I'm not doing anything here, right? I did not write one single kubectl command here, right? Which means that this is now targeting one registry, right? If you see this one, this is again going to one cluster, which is there like locally. If I have 5 clusters, then I can automatically move these things to the 5 clusters, right? So that I can do that as well. Okay, let's do one last quick change here. So before, I think I request few more minutes for the last one. I want to show you the real change, how it happens. So just to make a note of this one, right? So let me copy this one and put it on my VS Code so that I know what is the SHA that was deployed. So let me go to my application, resources and properties. Okay, I have Bangla here. So somebody has to tell me hello world in Bangla, right? So this is what I'm going to do. So let me go and deploy this one right there. So I have to go change my sources, I guess. I have not have the latest one, right? Creating a message. Okay, so let me change this to, I hardcode this for this one. Okay, hello call kata. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. let me commit this source, update message, sync changes, okay, and all done, you're good. Now let's wait for, I'll be on this screen for a second because I want this to be, changes to be noted, and there's an update message which is being done, okay. So let's be here. So let's watch for this change. So in few seconds, once the image gets pushed into the registry, I should start to see another rollout happening automatically for me based on the digest, right? Because the digest has changed, so obviously the image would have changed, so obviously there will be a rollout. So now everything is completely done automatically. I'm not doing anything myself, right? I'm not. So this is very extensible and reusable because Git is a source of truth. So I can use Git as my source of truth to kind of do things in case if my cluster goes off completely, right? I can go to Git, start getting stuff from there and syncing my another new cluster with it. So it's as easy as that, okay? So let's see if it's done. So let's see if my build is done. So its push is happening here. So let's wait for a few seconds. So I've been, this registry has been acting on me since morning. It's kind of pretty slow. So let's see if build is done and push is done. Let's wait for that. So while I do that, let me also go. So we have seen this one, I think 66C, right? That is the pod ID. So let it happen. So I'll also share some resources for you. So obviously I don't have time to tell this story. There's a nice story which I put down there. So this resource slides, you have everything on this. You can go here once you get the slides. I put on all the things which I talk right now, including my demo sources. Everything is there. I can use that one. Okay, and obviously I have to thank these organizers and as well as thank you as well. So in case if you like the session, you can also scan this QR code to get to the demo repository. So please do tweet with all these handles. That really helps the organizers who have done a fabulous job and also encourages me to improve my next session. And that's all. Right, I think it's time up. So I have to complete it. Before I leave, let's see if this thing is done. Obviously, the build is done right now. Let me do a hard refresh. You see here? That's the last part of it. I think it's on time, right? It's kind of rolling out a new update for you because I've changed my build and deployed my build and new update is here. All right? And thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed the session. Please do reach out to me in any questions that you have. Happy to answer.